Hello, welcome to Better Together. Today I'm partnering with Dave from Split. We're going to talk about how we can use feature flags to decouple deployment and release. So we've got a really quick agenda here. We're going to go over speaker introductions, then we're going to dive into Atlassian Open DevOps, and I'm going to give a quick introduction to that. I'm going to hand it over to Dave, and we're going to talk about Split a little bit. And then we're going to go through an integrated demo of how Atlassian and Split work together. And then finally, Dave's going to talk about why feature management belongs in your tool chain and kind of the value proposition for it. So to start off with the speaker introductions, my name is Warren Ruziak. I'm a senior technical evangelist at Alaskan, and I spend most of my time working on demos and going to conferences and talking to people about DevOps and our Atlassian toolchain.
Thanks, Warren. My name is Dave Caro, and I'm Senior Progressive Delivery Advocate at Split. And like Warren, I spend my time creating demos, explaining this to people, and I really enjoy getting a chance to share how these things work.
All right, I'm going to pick up here, and I'm going to dive into the Atlassian Open DevOps toolchain and kind of talk to you guys about that to start with. So Atlassian Open DevOps is a couple things. One, it's a out-of-the-box toolchain that focuses on adding capabilities to Jira software by integrating other Atlassian products and allowing developers to integrate third-party products from the open market. So the other thing that Atlassian Open DevOps is this idea that there is no kind of single all-in-one tool chain that is sufficient for all software teams. Atlassian feels that different teams have different needs and they have different skill sets, and therefore it's better for them to be able to build out a tool chain that gives them what they need and what they want, rather than having kind of an all-in-one tool chain out of the box. So what we give you is Atlassian Open DevOps to start with, which has a few tools in it, Jira software, Bitbucket pipelines, Opportunity, and Confluence. And then we empower you to build out any tool chain that you want from there. So I'm going to run through the tools in this tool chain really quickly, and then I'll hand things over to Dave. So the first tool in Atlassian Open DevOps starting point is Jira software. So Jira software is kind of the central point of work we feel for teams. So we're going to track our backlog, all the work we need to do. And this is going to integrate with all of our other tools so that we can pull data from other tools into Jira software and make this kind of a one-stop shop for everything you might want to know about a project. One of the new features of Atlassian Open DevOps is a thing called Release Hub. One of the things we found is that in a Jira Kanban board, you might end up with hundreds or thousands of issues in various different states, and it can be really hard to understand the state of a particular feature or set of features by looking at the Kanban board. So if you've got a dozen issues that are related to a specific piece of work that you're going to release, you can pull those into Release Hub, and this lets you hyper focus on just that work and understand the status of just that subset of work. So this is, again, just a feature of Jira software that lets you really focus on some subset of your backlog. Part of Open DevOps is Bitbucket. Bitbucket is our source control tool. Standard source control has all of the features you would expect, and it comes with Bitbucket pipelines, which is our CI/CD tool. Bitbucket pipelines basically lets you build deployment pipelines by writing YAML code. So right from your browser or your IDE, you can build pipelines in code. And then when you push those to Bitbucket, Bitbucket pipelines will pick up those files and start to run them. Opportunity is an ops tool. You can set up on-call teams and on-call rotations in this tool. You can ship your alerts from various different platforms, like say AWS, into Opportunity, and you can escalate these into Jira issues if you want, or you can acknowledge them and triage them right in Opportunity. It's quite flexible. Next tool we're going to talk about is Confluence. Confluence is our multi-user collaboration kind of tool. You can build documents for design docs and operational runbooks and all kinds of stuff in here. You can integrate with other tools like Figma to do diagramming, and it just gives you a place to collaborate on and build a documentation, and it integrates tightly with Jira software. Now, one of the things we recognize is that you might not have all of the functionality you need right from the Open DevOps offering that we have. So instead, you might want to integrate other tools to expand the capabilities of Open DevOps. And this is where the open tool chain idea comes in. You can go into our marketplace and you can find integrations for other products. So if you decide you want a feature flag tool and you have a particular feature flag vendor you like Split, you can come into the marketplace, you can search for Split, and you're going to see an integration that you can install, which is going to add tight integration with Split so that you can start to use that tool directly with your Jira software instance. And we have partnerships with many tool vendors across the spectrum of tools. So if there's something you want, a capability you need, you could probably find an integration for it in the Atlassian marketplace. Now, there's also the possibility that you have a product that you want to integrate with that doesn't have an existing integration. As an example, you might have home rolled a really cool tool that you use for your work, but it's not something available in the open market and no one's built an integration for it. In that case, we have the Atlassian developer APIs. So these APIs are REST APIs that allow you to build integrations with any of our products. There's also Forge, which lets you build graphical front ends inside of our tools. So if you want to add a panel to Jira software that integrates with your own tool, you're fully empowered to do that through Atlassian Open DevOps and the REST APIs and Forge. Now I'm going to hand this over to Dave, and Dave's going to do a quick introduction to kind of the Split offering.
Thanks, Warren. So Split has what we call a feature data platform. And there's two main capabilities of the feature data platform, and that is feature management and control, and that's sort of feature flags and remote configurations. Some people would call those dynamic configurations. And feature measurement and learning, which is how do I, as I'm rolling my features out, how do I learn automatically from the process? If you look at the left, the inputs really here are feature flags, which are controlling deploy, decoupling deploy from release, and then customer event data and really systems event data, and an attribution engine that can do clever things with that when you need it to. That unlocks a whole bunch of use cases. And we're going to talk about really progressive delivery today and how you can change sort of the speed and safety of your releases and keep everything coordinated, which is really why we're working together with Atlassian.
All right, I'm going to dive in and start a quick integrated demo of Atlassian and Split working together to push a change out to production. So typically, developer work is going to start by picking up a Jira issue to work on. In the past, you might go to the Jira Kanban board and find the issue you want to work on and grab it and assign it to your name and move it to work in progress. But if you've got a Kanban board with thousands of Jira issues in various different states, it can be really tricky to track work for a specific feature you're trying to deliver. So we've recently created something called Release Hub, and Release Hub lets you kind of hyper-focus on a subset of the work in your Kanban board. So if you have many Jira issues that are related to a specific feature that are a subset of the total backlog, you can move them to a specific release and do your work inside the release rather than in the Kanban board. So to enable Release Hub, we're going to click on Features, and then we're going to find Releases, and we're going to check that. And when we're done, we're going to see this Releases tab show up in the left-hand nav bar. From here, you can create a version. When you click Create Version, you're going to give it a name, you can give it a description, and you can set a start and an end date. So I've created a version here, fiscal year 22 Q4 bug fixes. Once you've got a release created, you can move into all of the Jira issues that are going to be part of this release, and you can change the fixed version to your new release that you've created. And then once you finish that, under the progress bar, you're going to see that there are now a number of issues that are in progress and some of them that are not done, and potentially some of them are already in the done state. If you click on the fiscal year 22 Q4 bug release link in the left-hand side, you'll drill in to the actual release. And this release page has a couple sections. The first section is the related work section. In this section, you can attach links to various tools related to this release. So if you're pushing out a new feature with this release, maybe you're going to have links to your design docs, you're going to have links to your New Relic metrics pages, you're going to have links to maybe some of your operational readiness requirements so that the developers can keep tabs on those. And you might have links to your feature flagging page. The other section is the issue list. So in this case, we've added 5 Jira issues to this particular release, IM 227 to 231. And under the issues, we can see a bar that shows the progress. The blue indicates issues that are in progress, green indicates issues that are done, and gray indicates issues that are not done yet. They haven't been started. Now, one of the cool things you can do from here is you can create feature flags. So if you click on the add flag, this dialog box pops up, and you can choose to create a flag in any of the tools you've installed an integration for. So in this case, we're going to create a feature flag in Split. And before I hand this over to Dave, I'm going to mention that the application that we're working with here is a microservice built on top of AWS. It's comprised of multiple Lambdas, some DynamoDB tables, some S3 buckets, and it's got a SageMaker model as well. And we deploy this to 5 different environments. We deploy it to a test environment, a staging environment, and then 3 different production environments. These environments are across multiple AWS regions. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass it over to Dave, and he can talk to us a little bit about how you would set up split feature flags to handle that scenario.
Great, thanks so much. So as Maura mentioned, we started from the board there, and you want to create the split for the feature flag at the beginning of the process. You want to do it before you're writing your code or as you're writing your code, right? It's not something you add in when you think you're done. It's something you put in as you're working on the code. And what's cool to have the integration between Jira and here is that you know what the name of the feature flag is. You can just copy and paste it. And here we're in Jira. We said let's create a flag. It pops up a dialog, and we would give it a name. And you'll notice at the bottom there, it's already been pre-associated with the Jira issue, right? That's obviously one of the benefits of being integrated. But so once you create the flag, you have a little bit of metadata, who's the owner, or there's some tags associated with this, is the bug bash at the end of the year. And now we're ready to get to the interesting part, which is feature flags let you control exposure, let you decouple deploy from release. And it does that based on targeting rules. And we're right now in the test environment. If you look at upper left there, just under the name of the flag, the environment is the test environment. And we want to create our targeting rules for the test environment. So I'm going to click add rules there. And these are going to be pretty straightforward. We've got an on state and an off state, and the on, the new code path with the bug fix is executed, and in the off position, it skips that path. That's using the old code. And the thing for the test environment is we want this to be on for everybody. We're not going to be selective about who gets this and who doesn't get it, because it's the test environment. It's just us, right? And so it's on for everyone. Now, whenever I make a change in Split, before I actually make it so, I'm going to get a diff screen like this, which is, green lines for things that are added, red lines for things that are removed. We'll see this again in a bit. Just a nice way to get a reality check. Am I changing what I think I'm changing? What are the implications, right? So we created targeting rules for the test environment that said give everybody the on experience. Now we're going to do staging. We're going to make it just a little bit different, but it's mostly the same. And so we'll start by, if you look sort of the bottom middle there, I'm going to copy the rules we made from the test environment to get started on the staging environment. And so here I am. What I'm going to do is in here under the individual target section, I'm going to actually expose this selectively. So using individual targets, which is an allow list, I'm going to have this go to one of my beta users and one of my early access users and the dev team. So they're always going to get the on experience, right? When I set up prod, though, I'm actually going to, again, I'm going to clone that rule, right? I'm going to do prod. In this case, I'm only going to let the dev team have the on experience. It's going to be a little more controlled here. So, but I'm now ready to go. And that when this eventually gets to prod, it'll already be set. So it's off for everybody except on for the dev team. So at this point, we're ready to kind of head back in and get some real work done, kind of moving through our pipeline.
All right. So once you've got your Jira issues sorted out in your release, and you've got your feature flag set up and you're ready to get into development, you need to find your repositories. So Jira has this code tab in the left-hand nav bar. And if we click on that, we're going to see a list of all the repositories that are associated with this project. In this case, we've got a number of Bitbucket repositories associated with this Jira project. However, this functionality is replicated for any of the source control tools you've integrated. So if you have a GitHub integration, your GitHub repos can show up here. If you've got a GitLab integration, your GitLab repositories will show up here. And you get kind of the same functionality regardless of which SCM tool you choose. So for this demo, we're going to click on the submit image repository, and that's going to jump us over to Bitbucket. And here's kind of the source view of Bitbucket. And the first thing we're going to do once we come into this repository is we want to grab the clone URL so that we can get back to our workstation and get into our IDE and actually get some work done. So we click the clone URL, we can grab our clone URL from here, and we can paste that into our terminal and run a clone. Once we've got our code cloned down, you can go in and edit your files and make your changes. Once you've got your changes made, we're going to go do our standard Git process. So if we look at Git status here, we see that we're on branch IM227. We've got a change made to a single file, lambda.go. So what we're going to do is we're going to git add all, and we're going to do a git commit. One of the things that's important for the integrations to work is that we add the Jira issue ID to the commit messages. So if we look at the commit message here, we've got IM227 in it. Once we've done the commit, we're going to push, and we're going to git push -u origin IM227. Again, to make the integrations work really well, it's important to put the Jira issue IDs in your branch names. They don't have to be the entire branch name. They just have to have the Jira issue ID in the branch name. And this lets the Jira/Bitbucket or Jira/GitHub integration associate the work that we're doing in our coding tools and in Git with the Jira issues, so the developers don't have to go back into Jira and make these updates manually. This stuff just happens. So anyways, we've made a change. We've done our standard Git process, and the code is now pushed up into Bitbucket. And what we'll see is if we go into the pipeline section, we've kicked off a pipeline. So Bitbucket pipelines requires a Bitbucket pipeline.yaml file to be created, and you can write this in your IDE. It's just a YAML file, and you can kind of describe the steps you want to run and the conditions that you want to be true before these pipelines will kick off. So in this case, we're running our development pipeline. And this happens in this case whenever the branch is not mainline. So because we're in a feature branch, IAM227, we're going to kick off the development pipeline. And this pipeline runs a number of steps. First thing it's going to do is run some unit tests, then it's going to run some sneak tests to check for security vulnerabilities. And then we're going to deploy to our test region, which happens to be in US West 1 in this case. And then after every deploy, we're going to run a set of integration tests to regression tests to see if we've actually broken anything. Once all of these steps are done, we have finished our development deployment, and we can then do some user acceptance testing to decide whether it's right to go to production or not. Once our UAT testing is done, we're really happy with the way the change is working. We're going to create a pull request. So to create a pull request, we're going to click on pull requests in the left-hand nav bar, and then we're going to click the create pull request button. And from here, you can choose which branch you're going to merge into and which branch you're going to go to. In this case, we're merging the feature branch IAM227 into mainline. You can throw in a description. There is a checkbox here for deleting the feature branch once the pull request is merged. You don't have to check that, but you can. It's another automation that just helps keep your repositories clean. Once you've created the pull request, you'll come to this view. And one of the nice things about this screen is on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the dev pipeline execution, pipeline number 429 for IAM227. If you click on that, it'll take you to the pipeline execution. You can look at the steps to see that they passed, to see which steps are run, and just to make sure everything was done, properly. From here, your approvers can approve the pull request, and then they can choose to merge it. When you choose to merge, you can throw a comment in here, and you can check this little checkbox that says transition issue. So this is a way of moving a JIRA issue from in progress to done, or to the next step in the JIRA issue lifecycle. So again, it's just another way to stop developers from having to go back into JIRA and instead allow them to, do the minimal amount of GUI work that they want to do and stay kind of into the developer tools. Once the pull request completes and the merge to mainline is completed, we see another pipeline is going to kick off. This is defined in that same Bitbucket pipeline.yaml file I talked about earlier, but this is going to run a completely different set of steps. In this case, we're deploying to our 3 production environments, and after each deployment, we're running a set of integration tests to make sure that we haven't done any damage, we haven't broken anything. And again, the Bitbucket pipeline files are really flexible. You can build out a lot of different workflows in here. So this is a really simple example, but you could do other more complicated scenarios as well. Now, I've talked before earlier in this presentation about setting the commit message to have the JIRA issue ID and setting the branch name to have the JIRA issue ID. This is important because it populates JIRA issues with information about the work that's being done. So if we look on the right-hand side here, there's a development panel. And this development panel, when we looked at this JIRA issue the first time, was empty. There wasn't anything in it. But now it's been populated with a bunch of data. So if you click into there, you'll actually open up another window, which looks like this, and it has a bunch of tabs. So we're going to go through these really quickly. The branches tab basically shows you all the branches that were associated with this particular JIRA issue. So in this case, we've got a single branch, IAM227, that has been merged. We created a pull request through the Bitbucket UI. If you wanted to instead create a pull request from the JIRA issue, that's also capable, does the same thing, it takes you to the same places. And you can click on the links in here to repository and branch to take you to the spots you would think they would take you to in the Bitbucket tool. The next tab we want to take a look at is the commits tab. We can see that there were 2 commits for this change. We had a single commit in the IAM227 branch, and then we can see that we merged that commit into the mainline branch, and we can see some times. The pull request tab takes us to a list of pull requests that were made as part of this JIRA issue, and we can see that they were merged, who the author was. If there had been different reviewers, they would show up here as well. And you can click on these links to go to those pull requests. We can see that there was a build done. In this case, the build was done with Bitbucket pipelines, and we have links to the actual execution. So you can follow these links to go see the pipeline that executed and the steps that were run. The next window is the deployments window. So this shows us all of the environments that we were deploying to. So in this case, we have a test deployment, a staging deployment, and 3 production deployments. They're all successful. And you can follow these links to go directly to what was deployed and the pipelines that executed to deploy them. And there's also a feature flag tab. In this tab, we can see that we have a single feature flag associated with this Jira issue, and it's on, and it currently has 2 rules. Now, another really interesting thing is that the release hub that we had talked about starts to update as you do this work as well. And we sort of mirror the development panel here. So we can see that we've added builds, deployments, feature flags, and kind of the status of the pull request. So we were working on IM227, and now the status of this is done. We can see in the bar at the top that we now have a green block showing that this issue is finished. We can see that the pull request was merged, there was a build, there were deployments all the way through to production, and that there is a feature flag associated with that. If we click on that feature flag here, it's going to pull us back to the feature flag tab of the development panel in the Jira issue we were working on. And if you click on the feature flag link here, this is going to take you directly into Split. So I'm going to hand this back over to Dave now, and Dave's going to take us through some production feature flag configuration and a few other interesting scenarios.
Yeah, thanks. So remember when we set up the flag at the beginning, we actually set up the production environment to have a rule which would list the development team to the on experience, and everybody else will have it off. And that's what we're seeing here, which is that when it first gets to production, it's off for all of the users, but the dev team can test it. Right. So validated in production is best practice. Now, but we want to actually, we're in production, we've done all of our testing, we want to start rolling it out, right? And so we're going to do a canary. We're going to give 5% of the real users access to this change. And we'll still have the dev team allow list on so that they can always jump in there and see how it's running. But now we're out to 5% of the real users. And as we did before, anytime you go to make a change, Split's going to put up a diff for you. So you have a visual reality check, like, is this really what I want to be doing? I'm changing my default rule from being 0% on to 5% off, on, and of course, from being 100% off to being 95% off. So just kind of a visual way to kind of know, is this really, am I on the right track, right? Now, once we did that first production environment, remember there are 3 of them, we're going to want to expand that to the others. So if you look at the top left there where it says environment, I've now chosen a US East 1, and I'm going to make that same change. And then I'm going to do the same thing for US West 2, right? And so real straightforward, it's all the same stuff. I'm basically just going to ratchet it up. Now I've got 5% across 3 regions. Pretty good way to double check to make sure something's not fundamentally kind of missed in how we got there without affecting very many of the users. Now, optionally, after I've got that going, I might want to slowly increase the load rather than going from like 5% to 100%. I might want to actually take a couple stops along the way and watch what happens to my infrastructure. So if you've got a change that you think maybe infrastructure related, you almost certainly want to do this. Some people do this every time, no matter what. It kind of depends on kind of your threshold for how many extra steps you want to have. But here we're stopping a couple of times and we're keeping an eye on the infrastructure. And the key here is that if we start seeing too much pain, we don't have to actually throw a big war room and have a big deal about what's to be done. We can just ratchet it back. If it doesn't throw errors at 5%, or it doesn't slow things down too much at 5%, we can go back to 5%, right? We don't have to actually break everything. So, well, once we're done, we're up to 100%. How do we manage things going forward? Is there a straightforward way to kind of understand what's been released and what's ready to be kind of cleaned up in our code? And in Split, you have a rollout board, which gives you, there's some automated statuses here. And if you look at those little green circles underneath the one we're working on today and under the 100% released, 3 of the environments show green and 2 of them show yellow. And what that's telling you is there's currently live traffic going through the production environments. And it's been a little while since we've seen traffic going through staging or test for this feature. To the right of that, you've got this one called remove from code, submit image demo split. That actually is in that status because we did remove that. That's a split we thought we were going to use, but we didn't. And so it was only ever seen in the test environment, never made it to stage or production. And so at a glance, we can kind of see what's going on. And really more importantly, there's a ready for cleanup button up there. And if you were to click that, what that's going to do is tell you which of these feature flags haven't changed their status for 100 days. Because clearly it's time to clean something up, right? And so it'll look for things that are 100% released or removing code or ramping or killed and suggest that maybe it's time to pull those out, right? Now, what's cool, let's say we're at that screen and we're like, wait a minute, submit image duplicate GUIDs. It's been half a lifetime for me. I've been through 3 other releases since then. What was that about? Well, the cool thing is that the feature flags in Split and the issues in Jira stay connected. And so here I'm in Split. I was looking at that dashboard in Split, seeing that something probably ought to be cleaned up. And with one click, I can see which exact issue this is related to, and I can jump there and see the whole history inside Jira. And so this, again, there should be less like scratching your head and having to send a lot of slacks around, and more of it should be just kind of at your fingertips, right? And so the cool thing here is that the flags and issues, they stay connected over time. Now, we talked about a bug fix. We were doing a bug fix. It was kind of a series of small little things. We were kind of banging them out before the end of the year. But what if you had a release that was a bunch of related features that are all supposed to go live at the same time, and you want to do progressive delivery of that? You want to go out to 5% at first and see how it goes, but you got 5 separate things and they all have to be in sync. Well, it's actually a pretty straightforward thing to do, and you use what's called a parent-child relationship, right? So we're going to use one flag, this parent flag top left there, to control the exposure for the other 5 issues, the actual 5 features we're rolling out here. And the way you do that is with this sort of parent-child pattern. And the benefit of this is that by using one parent to control all 5 children, we're going to gradually increase exposure to the exact same 5%. So 5% will get all 5 of those features, not some random 5 for each, but literally the same 5% is going to get that cluster of features, right? And the way we do this is that you have a child controlling each of the features. In this case, it's an add recommendations feature. And then you have a parent, and that child is dependent on the parent. Right? And that's what you see here, which is the target rule says, hey, if this user is in a split called blah, blah, blah parent flag, and that state is on, then give them on, otherwise off. And so that lets the parent control whether this feature is exposed or not. And so this parent flag is going to control the release, and it's going to do that just like we saw before. We're going to individually target or allow list the dev team, so they always get to see this. And then we're going to, in this case, start out with 5% for this, and all 5 of those features are going to go to 5% of the population. So that was, we've covered some specifics. We showed the Jira bits, and we showed how they integrate with Split. We showed how creating kind of the process of creating flags and stuff. But let's take it up a level and talk about why would I what's the real benefit of doing feature flags in my development flow, and what does it do for me? And I'll get into the kind of answers you'd expect in a sec. But first, I wanted to actually look at a migration. Most of us have been involved in a fairly complex migration, right? And here's a situation where you want to go from Kinesis to Kafka. And normally, sort of in the early part of my career, this would have been something we would have done over a 3-day weekend. And we would have sort of been very optimistic of how we're going to get it done. But, at 3 a.m. Monday and at 4 a.m. Monday and at 5 a.m. Monday, we probably try to wrap up the final stage of this. And hopefully we didn't have a bad surprise along the way, right? And then you're coming up. What if instead you could do migrations like this during business hours with no risk? And that's exactly the sort of thing that this decoupling of deployment for release makes possible, even for a major migration, right? And so I'm just going to briefly step through this. I don't want to teach you how to do this, but just kind of give you an idea of what's happening here, which is, so normally you have the service A and service B, and Kinesis is between them, and then service B does some transformations, and then the end result ends up in a data store. And in order to do this migration, what we want to do is we want to bring up the new backend in parallel with the production one and not affect the users, right, at all. And so we're going to get ourselves set up to where we could actually have mirroring of the Kinesis traffic with going through Kafka. So the same traffic is going to go both ways, but you'll notice that the line going to Kafka is kind of a dark line, because it's dark. The users are not going to experience this. They're not going to see the results of this. They're not held up while it's waiting to write or anything. Literally, this is just happening kind of as a shadow, right? And we run that process over to service B, but when we tell service B, because of the state of a feature flag, hey, by the way, when you get the stuff from Kafka during this phase, just throw it out when it's done. Go ahead and compute it, but then toss it, right? So we're going to load service B with the same load as if it was doing production, but we're actually not going to try to store that in the data store. We're just going to toss that out. And then we can run this. We can do these steps during business hours one at a time. This isn't something we have to turn everything off to do on a weekend. This is something we do a step at a time. And it might take us a day or 2 or 3. It doesn't really matter, because the users are still chugging along on the production route, and they don't think anything has changed, right? And when we're done, what we can actually do is, so we then start pushing actual production traffic we're going to keep through Kafka, and we take the data that was coming through Kafka, we write that to the data store, and we redirect the data that was coming from Kinesis and put that to dev null. Now, one thing that's really important to know is, A, we never did another deployment this whole time. We didn't start and stop a service this whole time. We didn't change network routing. We literally brought all this up, and then because we decoupled deploy from release, all of this was up, and then we used flags to kind of step our way through this migration. And if anything had gone wrong at any point, we can just back up And until the very end, where we actually decided to push the Kinesis stuff to dev null, we could go back. Like there was no data lost anywhere, right? And so this is what really changes what's possible. It makes life very, very different. So I wanted to give that kind of more complex example. It's not just as simple as pushing out features. You can do some pretty like hairy stuff without it taking days and being your off hours. But let's take it up kind of even a higher level than that. You may kind of need to explain this to others, or get your boss to agree, or maybe you need to convince other people, like, what's the value in this? And the value that shows up again and again is things like increased release velocity and reduced risk. So we saw how we could reduce the risk of things by gradually rolling out and being able to stop them. That can make a big difference. Also, enabling efficiency at scale. So some of you may have already started using feature flags, kind of an in-house ad hoc way. Maybe you have a database table, there's a column there that says whether a feature should be exposed or something. As you scale this up to more and more teams, things like dealing with dependencies, things like visibility and transparency across teams of what's going on, kind of the whole feature observability aspect of things becomes much easier if you have a common system in the middle, right? And then reducing cost per release by merging code early and more often. And the thing here is that because we're using feature flags, we're less scared to push things out to production. We're more likely to do it more often. And Jez Humble had two things to say about. One was if we're going to be pushing more often, we want to make that less painful. And second of all, we want to make the cost of change like approach zero. Turning the crank should be a very easy thing to do. And so by reducing the cost of release through streamlining these things and having there be less fire drills and sort of merge hell, much better. And then lastly, because we have this kind of control and because we're not doing big bang releases and because we can control releases and we can control migrations very gradually and watch what's happening, we protect revenue and user experience. So you're less likely to end up in a meeting with somebody's boss about why this happened and how's it going to be stopped from happening again, right? You make it more like running a regular business. So finally, you want to reduce tech debt, and that comes both with visibility and with having a straightforward process for moving through this. But how other people feel about this, right? So WePay, which handles a lot of money, they found a 50% reduction in incident response time. So when things did go wrong, really took them half the time to get to the bottom and get it fixed. And then Vita, which is in the healthcare business, they're performing 4 times more releases. They're actually getting more features per release done. So it's not that they're just doing lots of small releases. They're actually pushing more stuff all the way through to production, all the way to the users more often. I like this slide the best, though, which is, what's the difference to you and me about releasing this way? Decoupling deploy from release, what does that really mean? And this is from a blog post called On a Mission to Kill Release Nights. And it's just the hours of the day localized to where the people are that are doing the work. And if you look sort of on the left side, there's the 7.5, that's right before 8 o'clock, that's 7:30 in the morning. And on the right, there's that 17.5, that's sort of 5:30. Most of the work is happening during normal business hours, right? So working 9 to 5. And the kills, which is the pink one there, that's basically something went wrong, we had to turn it off. Those are almost all, again, during business hours, right? And so they're able to stop things, they're able to do their work and stop things without having to be a weekend or a late night thing. And, first part of my career would have had this kind of the reverse diagram, right? Which is that we always did things at 2 in the morning on a Sunday, it seemed like, when it was a big deal. So the last thing I just wanted to say is that you may already doing some of these practices, or these may be entirely new to you, and we're all kind of on this journey, and there's things to benefit from no matter where you are in this journey. You don't have to be sort of doing the highest form of this to be getting really meaningful benefits, right? But every time you go through a new stage, you do get new stuff, right? So the basic flags, having a psychological safety of being able to quickly turn things off and be able to decouple deploy from release so that you have more control. Advanced flags where maybe you're going to target who gets what when, and using percentage-based rollouts to really even further reduce the blast radius, and starting to play with measurement and actually be able to see the impact of what you're doing. Moving on to measure and learn, where you're actually more actively managing a larger number of features, and you're able to use the automated remember we talked about Split being a featured data platform. So using those automated attribution engine features to understand the impact of releases to drive decisions. So you've got data to drive the decisions, not just somebody's hunch. And then finally, there may be times where you want to do experiments, where you truly want to do like an A/B test to figure out what's the best path forward, what's really going to draw the behavior from the users or the behavior from the infrastructure, it could be, that we want. Like maybe only in actually doing this and comparing one thing and another can we figure out which is the best path. And then iterate. And all these things are interrelate with each other, right? the thing about a journey and the thing about is that, yes, there's technology, but it's more about the journey and the people and what we learn than it is about any particular feature. And so I just want to point out that at Split, this is the part we kind of have the most fun with. We love to work with other people and actually help them. And so we have lots of people whose job it is just to transfer knowledge and help people kind of answer questions to get through things. And those are the advisors and managers on the left. But if you look on the right, we don't all want to do an hour-long session with somebody or go to an onboarding session. And the Split Arcade is a interactive environment where you can actually learn this stuff on your own time in little bits and get certified. And one of the cool things about it is A, you can do it kind of between meetings, it's little teeny chunks, and B, you actually get to play with a functionality in an environment that wouldn't affect your own code. So it's not in your production environment, your dev or test environment either. It creates a sandbox that you can use, and so you're more likely to learn this. And the last thing I'll say about Arcade, let's say you're the lucky guys, gals to be in the first project, and now you're supposed to share this idea with 10 other teams in your company. What Arcade lets you do is just say, hey, jump in here, this will orient you. And instead of having a bunch of transfer of information sessions where you're having to help people out a bit at a time, people can sort of self-onboard, and then you can kind of round out the edges. So it really makes the journey of going from trying it a little bit to using it as a standard practice much more straightforward. And that's really, Warren, all I really wanted to share about Split today. And I hope that we've been able to show people how our tools are working together and this kind of different way of working.
Awesome. All right, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for this discussion. And I'd like to thank Dave for talking to us about Split today. All right, everybody. Thank you.